All right, looks like most of our attendees are from United States. Good to know that. All right, so it's officially 8 a.m. here on the West Coast, so let's start. Thank you everyone for joining us. Today we'll be speaking about recruitment strategies for Southeast Asian students, and we have two experts with us that are going to discuss this topic. And since we're a small group, please feel free to type your questions in the chat box, and our guests will be, more than happy to address them as they're speaking. Or if they cannot get to your question during the presentation, they'll make sure that towards the end of the presentation, they will definitely get back to that. So before we move further, I will go ahead and introduce our guest, but first let me introduce myself. My name is Yasser Ansari. I'm the founder and CEO of an organization called Simple Ed. We do recruitment tours in many parts of the world, including Southeast Asia. And we're really excited to be there in the fall of 2023 because we are going to be doing two different tours. And one of those tours is specifically dedicated to community colleges. And that is something I'm really excited about because I know students from Southeast Asia do love to discover different options, and community college is a growing interest in that area. So for those of you who do not know, about 11% of international enrollment for community college comes from Vietnam alone, and it's 3% from India. So you can see the disparity with a country like India that has a huge population versus a small country like Vietnam that is just surpassing India by many different numbers. So the second person that we have here is Adam. Adam has been in Southeast Asia for quite some time and is originally from United States and has worked in international education in various different capacities. So he brings many unique perspective to the table. And then we have Kevin, who's joining us from Vietnam, and he's a senior country manager. Once again, a very seasoned international educator and can be a great resource to address all of your questions and inquiries. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive in and start our session. So I'll hand it over to Adam, who's going to start. Thank you, Adam.
Hi, so I'm Adam Pavlakovich. I'm from Los Angeles, California. I studied in Denver, Colorado. I lived there for about 8 years, and then I moved to Bangkok, Thailand. I've been here for about 8 years in the private education industry. I've done admissions, mostly helping admissions for Southeast Asian students, specifically Thai students, go to universities abroad, mostly in America and the UK, specifically like high-ranking universities. But now I currently work for one university. It's the University of the Potomac. We're located in Washington, D.C. and Virginia. Most of our students are international students. So I get to help a lot of students in this area go to America and pursue their education dreams there. Next slide. Yeah, sir. Thank you. All right, we can keep going. Thanks. Okay, so I want to talk about this because when we talk about Southeast Asia, it's a large amount of countries, but they're all very, very different. And I think it's really good to have me talk about Thailand and Kevin talk about Vietnam because although they're next to each other, they could not be more different in terms of demographics and in terms of how you approach the students. Previously, I did admissions consulting for Thai students, but I also worked with a lot of Vietnamese students as well. And it was just a completely different process. So let me break down first the Thai high school landscape. You'll have your first tier international schools, which is for the uber wealthy in Thailand and most of the expat community. Some example schools are listed. They're called like St. Andrews or ISB. Those are very popular schools here. The yearly tuition can be $10,000 to $30,000 US dollars a year. Their expectations are to get into Ivy Leagues. So every parent of those children will want to go to Harvard, MIT, something like that. And they'll spend a lot of money for the admissions process to get that. Then you have the second tier, which is second tier international schools and bilingual schools. That's kind of for the upward middle class and then the rest of the expat community. In that, you'll also see a lot of students from Korea and Japan and then some other surrounding Southeast Asian countries as well. Yearly tuition is about $5,000 to $10,000 US dollars. They're the core demographic that most universities will want to target. So these students want to study abroad or go to top tier universities. They are interested in financial aid or scholarships. They are more approachable when it comes to state schools or community colleges and stuff like that. And then you have the public high schools. There are some standout public high schools. I listed one. Triam Udam is a standout school. A lot of good scholars from there. We had some students go to MIT that came from the school, but usually the public schools, they're not going to be very available to recruit from. They mostly speak Thai. The English is pretty poor. Most of their tuition is free. There's a few public schools where you have to pay for it, but their expectations, if they do study abroad, which is rare, are going to be scholarships. They probably can't afford it. And to be honest, their language skills aren't good enough. So you're going to be probably targeting the second tier international schools and bilingual schools. Okay, next. So I want to talk about the language barriers a bit, because if you've been to Bangkok, the English levels are quite good, but for the entire country, it's actually quite bad. The proficiency is very low. We are ranked like number 97 out of 111 for English skills. And if you see the chart from 2007 to 2022, it's gotten worse. There's a few reasons for that. I'll go into it, but this all points to the fact that targeting the public high schools isn't great. You're really going to want to target those bilingual schools and the upper middle class section. It's unfortunate. I really wish the trend was in the other direction. And I think you'll see that trend with Vietnam and why those students are so, the percentage is so much higher going to America. But yeah, one of the big factors of Thai students is just their English isn't good. If you can go to the next slide, please, Yasser. So the reasons for this, there's just a super high inequality rate, the highest actually inequality rate in East Asia and the Pacific region. Also for foreign teachers, the pay is lower than Vietnam, definitely China, Malaysia, Indonesia. So it's the lowest pay for teachers. At the lower schools, you have unqualified teachers. Oftentimes they tend to be backpackers or something. And then if they are English teachers, but they're Thai nationality, they tend to have low English levels themselves. When they're learning, they focus on grammar and reading. There's not much conversation. And one thing I really want to stress, and you'll see this too in the difference between Thailand and Vietnam, Thailand was never colonized. That contributes a lot to the landscape here. And for a lot of reasons, it's why their education system is a bit different and their language levels are a lot poorer than the surrounding countries. Okay. So when you're recruiting students, here's some cultural barriers, right? In Thailand, the kids push the sales, okay? The kids have the say. Parents really want a comfortable life for their kid. So what you'll see is this kind of contradiction in Thai culture that I write about, where the parents want their kids to have agency, they want their kids to have hobbies, and they want their kids to pursue goals. But the problem is the parents don't really want to push the kids because they don't want the kids to be uncomfortable, right? They have really good intentions, but they worry about the child facing any type of resistance in their life. And also, again, I just want to stress, because Thailand wasn't colonized ever, the entire country never really had a wartime period in the last 100 years. So they've had it pretty easy, and parents want to keep it that way for their children. So these children grow up, pretty well protected, but at the same time, they're often not allowed to kind of pursue their goals. So then oftentimes parents will kind of dictate what the kids should do in regards to studying and stuff like that. But ultimately, the kids have the final say. So you're really going to want to appeal to the child. And if the kid wants to do something, then the parents will let them. And I'll kind of explain in a bit how to target the kid and what they're looking for. But I think you'll often see, if you talk to Thai parents, is they really want their kid to have some type of career goal. But oftentimes with most Thai kids I've talked to, they've never been asked, what do you want to do for a job? Or what type of hobbies do you have? They're often left to their own because the parents don't want to push them. But as a result, the kids actually don't have a lot of experience, or they're not allowed to approach different hobbies as they would in other places. And this is the same as the education system a bit, where they're kind of more dictated to and told what to do, almost as a way to ease the mental weight it would take. But unfortunately, it kind of hinders them as they grow up. Okay. So learning styles. At the public schools, it's still pretty common in Southeast Asia, but it's rote memorization. The teachers read out loud to students, and students kind of just have to copy it down. Classroom sizes can be up to 40 students, usually more. You're not supposed to question the teacher. Asking questions is discouraged. For most public schools, there's no extracurricular activities. And this is a weird thing in Thailand, but it's true. Kids, you cannot fail the kids. They do not give Fs. Kids cannot flunk out of school. So no matter what, they will pass. So that often leads to them not really fighting to get good grades because it's just kind of given to them. That does change if you go to the second tier international schools and the bilingual ones. They mimic the Western education style. They do have more extracurricular activities, but oftentimes the Thai kids still struggle a bit with language barriers because with the first tier international schools, these kids have been going to international school since kindergarten. Their English is usually better than their Thai. But for the second tier ones and the bilingual ones, their Thai is still predominant. And that's what they talk to with their families and their friends. So their English does suffer a bit. And if they did grow up in Thai public schools early on, those learning habits are still hard to change. But they do have more access to extracurricular activities. Okay. So when you talk to parents about sending their kids abroad, there's a lot of concerns, right? Number one is always going to be safety. Um, again, like I said, they're very protective of their children and they don't want anything bad to happen. And children often stay in their home until they get married. Um, so parents are very afraid, not just for the kid, but for the parents themselves to leave their kid and have their kid be independent abroad. Also, this has always been a fear, but it's grown recently with current events. But they are scared of racism. They ask me all the time, they see stories in the news about, maybe Asians getting attacked. This was more often after COVID happened, but that's always a question that they're going to ask you. And there is an adjustment to Western learning style. Like I said, in the traditional schools, their opinion is not really asked for. But in Western style schools, it's all about your opinion and how you feel about certain things and writing essays. It's not multiple choice questions, which is what they're used to. So there is an adjustment for that. Again, English is going to be a problem for them most of the time, and choosing the right major, because if they did not explore extracurricular activities, explore hobbies, or really think about what they want to do for their careers, more oftentimes than not, they're not going to choose the right major off the bat. So that's going to be a struggle. Okay, next. How do you address those? When you're talking to Thai students, again, you don't necessarily have to talk to the parents first. The kids will sell it to their parents because if the kids are happy, the parents are happy. But you want to discuss the campus and the student support systems. So you really want to share with the kids how you will support them and how they will learn about what they want to do, grow in their interests, academic or tutoring support if they need English help, if you can provide that. And again, making sure that their learning environment will be safe and that they'll be protected at all times. This is really, really important for Thai students and their parents. One thing I also want to stress is that like I said, when I worked with them and they had to choose between UK schools and US schools, especially with Thai kids, I always recommended US schools because it's a 4-year study program instead of a 3-year study program. The UK schools, you have to really pick a major right away and stick with it. And I just didn't recommend that for Thai students. They usually need that extra year just to figure out what they want to do first because they didn't have a chance usually in high school. So that's something I would stress to them as well. Okay. So the family dynamics, like I said, if you want the family to sign on, you get the student excited. If the student likes it, the family supports. But like I said, help the student understand that this is the place where they will get the agency that they need and that they've always wanted. They're going to have an environment without a lot of pressure. Okay. They don't want that. They don't want to compete. So they can make mistakes. They can learn academically. They can learn about themselves. When they come back home, they'll have a good reputation. They'll make their family proud. They'll have a U.S. degree, but they'll do it without, um, you know, risking failing out. Which again, they've never even had that threat before in Thai schools of failing. Um, and so, if you can remove those stress barriers from them, they'll sign on pretty quick. You just have to appeal to this for them. Okay. So that's Thailand. I'll let Kevin talk about Vietnam. I think you'll see how different it is. And I think when Kevin talks, uh, his approach to Vietnam is a lot more similar to most of the other surrounding Southeast Asian countries as well. Thailand is just a very unique scenario. So I wanted to really stress on that for anyone trying to recruit there. If there's no questions, I'll leave it to Kevin. Thank you.
Hi, Kevin. I can everyone hear Kevin?
Oh, can you hear me? Hello.
Yes, now we
Yeah,
can.
now we
Now we
can.
can. All right. Thank you. Go ahead, Kevin.
Thanks,
Sorry about that.
thanks, Adam. And hi, everyone. I'm Kevin. With my experience more than 12 years in the education industry, so I would like to take the opportunity to offer you some core information about Vietnam market. First, for the Vietnam market high school landscape, so there are three different types of Vietnamese high school in Vietnam. So the first one is the public, and the second one is private. And among the private, we have the private is purely local private high school, and another one is the international high school. We still consider is a private high school. And the curriculum, language instruction, and student demography. We into the next slide, please. For the public high school, we call it the local high school. So in this high school, we all the children are taught by the Vietnamese, purely Vietnamese. So this student is considered how to say have a very good opportunity to study overseas, because for the embassy, I mean the visa office, they very value the certificate from the public high school. I mean that the private high school still can be good, but if considered between put on the scale on the public high school and the private high school, unless it is the international high school where the student can have a very uh, fluent in English speaking. Otherwise, the private high school certificate is considered is more advantage in terms of the visa gain rate for Vietnam market. And for the private high school, um, like I mentioned, there are two types. One is running by the private investor, and this one will also taught in Vietnamese. I mean, the students are taught in Vietnamese. Uh, this this kind of private high schools to help those students that they don't have the ability to study in the public high school because of some reason, you know. And normally this private high school, we don't consider is a good choice for the student who wish to study overseas, rather than the public high school or the international high school. And 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 mostly public high school and private high school are mostly located in the big cities, and a public high school is nationwide everywhere in Vietnam. Next slide, please. And about the language barriers for the Vietnamese students, the very big disadvantage is most of them, when they studying in the high school period, um, are taught in Vietnamese. So the teacher always use the Vietnamese, the local language. And yes, they have a class is a language class, but I don't think that is the uh, big big help for the student, because only one class or two class per week. So this student has the very big uh, language barrier if they wish to study overseas. That's why in Vietnam, the language center is a big market, very potential. Many language center, you know, do a good job business in Vietnam, because when they graduate the high school year 12, I mean, they when they wish to study overseas, they need to prepare the language we call is the IELTS preparation or TOEFL in Vietnam. and that's a big language barrier in Vietnam. And also because of that reason, many students now, when they have the good finance, they will try to study international high school, where all the class will be taught in English. So it means that when the student be ready in the year 12, they very fluent in English, and according to they have no issue to sit for the IELTS exam or the TOEFL exam. So they are really ready to study overseas. But those students from the public have the disadvantage because they need to spend 1 year or two to get the IELTS or the TOEFL, and that's one thing very very is a big concern. But in another way, it's good for the English language center here because they have the potential market to build up the business here. Next slide, please. In terms of culture, uh, it is very obvious to see that the Vietnamese students are very passive studying. Especially those students when they study from the public high school, everything is prepared by the teacher, and all the handouts sent to them, given to the student. I mean, everything is set already. So the way of studying is very not active. That's why when these students come to US to study overseas, normally they will get they don't have a very smooth adaptation, to the new study environment because in Vietnam everything is set and prepared by the teacher. The students are not encouraged to ask questions and are not encouraged to do the library, do the research. So they need sometimes when they study overseas to to get the adapt to the new study environment. On the other hand, the student who study in the international high school is perfect, because they already study in the Western way in the international high school. So this type of student have, I mean, very ready to study overseas because they have a very proficiency of English, and also they have a very Western culture in terms of study. They are very active. They are very proactive in terms of do the homework, prepare for the lesson. So this is a good thing when you have the student coming from the international high school in Vietnam. And another thing is like Adam mentioned, uh, the 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 parents are also a little bit concerned about the safety when the students study in US, but it's different that they have the concern, but the willing to have the opportunity for their children to study overseas is much stronger than the concerning about the safety. Say, so they concern, but they really appreciate and value any chance that to let their children to study in the US. So what I'm trying to say is, even though they have a concern about safety, but it is not a big issue for them. It's just come across their mind. So the change to study US is much more important. Next slide, please. And I just mentioned about already is the culture of study here already. The student here very shy. They don't want to ask the question, and it's like the Asian culture. They very uh, they consider the face very important, and the student have the very traditional thinking like, well, if I ask the teacher about the student, my classmate will think that I'm stupid, I'm not smart. So this kind of very traditional and conservative thinking is still, unfortunately, is still in the mindset of the student here. So therefore, they more or less from the first semester or second semester when they study overseas, they need at least one semester or two semester to adapt the new way of studying. Yeah, and so that's all for Vietnam market. Yes, briefly, all the highlights and core information. Thanks for listening.
Well, thank you, Adam, and thank you, Kevin, for sharing your expertise. I think it really did give us insight into both of these markets. If there are any questions at this point of time, please feel free to type them in the chat box, and Adam and Kevin will be able to answer them. So while you guys are thinking about your questions, I just want to go over some of the points that were discussed. So language definitely is one of the factors that can play into decision making, whether to visit private schools, public schools, tier one, tier two cities. So those are important factors to consider. Another important point that I would like to raise, as you heard by both the speakers, is that sometimes institutions and while creating their strategies, they might paint Southeast Asia as one. But as we just heard, there are differences, not just in the ability of students, but also in the education system, culture, language, and other differences. So it might be smart to come up with strategies for specific countries. I know that is additional work, and sometimes we're responsible for recruitment throughout the globe, so it becomes tricky. But the more we can customize, the more success we can see in these markets. Adam and Kevin, are there any final thoughts that you would like to contribute before we conclude?
No, thank you so much, though. It was good. Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, I think I'm good too. Yeah, but what I just mentioned is that I believe Vietnam is still a very potential market for the international student recruitment. So if any institution or university would like to uh, enter and establish the market in Vietnam, I think it's still a very opportunity potential for the Vietnam market. Thanks.
Absolutely, Kevin. And there is data to back that up. If you want to dwell down into student mobility data, you can look at the open doors reports and just narrow it down by country. I was very amazed to see the numbers that I saw from Vietnam. And as I shared in the beginning, especially for community colleges, those numbers are exceptionally encouraging. Um, and I'm based in California, so I've been to campuses of community colleges that have so many Vietnamese students that some of the signs on the campus are in Vietnamese, which was a very fascinating experience for me. So yeah, I think there's a lot of potential. We just need to understand the market better and strategize better for these regions. I don't know why my slides are showing up in black, but these were the final two slides. I just wanted to share a little bit about Simple Ed, what we do. So Simple Ed organizes high school recruitment tours throughout the globe. And these are some of the regions that we currently provide our tours in: India, Pakistan, Middle East, MENA, Southeast Asia, Latin America, and Central America. So if anyone is interested in exploring these markets, you can definitely get in touch with Simple Ed team. And we have experts throughout the world and a network of high school counselors and educators, just like Adam and Kevin here, who are more than willing to help and share their knowledge so you can devise better strategies and also be more embedded in that local educational landscape to jumpstart your recruitment. So thank you all so much for being here. Thank you to our speakers for taking the time to share their knowledge with us. We really appreciate it. And I hope everyone has an amazing weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care. And bye bye.
Bye.